I get people who ask all the time, like, I'm stuck, I can't lose weight, I've been doing keto, I've been doing fasting, or it didn't work for me in the first place. And my first question always is, how much protein are you eating?
I'm really thrilled to have you here to dig in the field of autophagy and fasting. I think you're the perfect fit for that. But maybe you want to tell us a little bit more first about your personal health journey. What took you to be in that chair right now?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I need like 4 hours to explain it. But honestly, there's 2 times in my life that I've really had my health go into a crisis. And the first one was when I was 20, and I'm 49 now, and I had chronic fatigue syndrome. And so I learned in that process how important our microbiome is, and how important I had really bad candida that had led to really high levels of Epstein-Barr. And ironically, the part of that story that's so interesting is that I went to a medical doctor who was an expert in chronic fatigue, and his only solution to me was medication. And I was so blessed to have a mom that was so forward thinking. And she took me to a homeopathic doctor, and he put me on a keto diet. We just didn't call it a keto diet. He called it a candida diet. And it was basically meat and low sugared vegetables and fat. And, I went from not being able to get out of bed to, like, in 3 weeks being able to get up and function again. And I think that was like the first time I really saw how important your diet could be and the impact it could have on your health.
3 weeks. That's amazing.
Right? 3 weeks. And the interesting thing was the medical doctor told me that it was going to take years. He's like, we're going to put you for chronic fatigue. We're going to put you on medication, but we don't know which one will work. And it'll probably take several years to get well. And 3 weeks, I changed my diet, and boom, everything changed. So that was kind of my first spot. And then the second place that I really started to search for answers and how I came to fasting was in my early 40s. I was looking for solutions on how to help perimenopause. I wasn't sleeping. I was starting to get some depression and anxiety. I was getting hot flashes. And that was just about when the keto movement was starting, when we were starting to learn about fasting. The studies were just emerging. And this was, 7 years ago. And so I just started to dive into the idea behind, let's change diet and let's change our eating window. Mm-hmm. And what would it be like if I relied on fasting to heal me? And what could happen to my health there? And as many people are experiencing, is miraculous.
Yeah, and as you said, like years ago when you had yeast overgrowth and they put you on a ketogenic diet is because became really popular now, but the science has been there for a really long time.
Yep.
About which is the fuel that we burn and how do we play with that in our body, that has been there for a long time. So
yeah, it's so true. I was actually on my YouTube channel today doing a YouTube live, and somebody asked me about epilepsy and keto. And I said, well, that we just are starting to, decades ago, we started to look at epilepsy, keto as a good solution for epilepsy. But the original studies on keto and epilepsy were done back in the 1920s. So what's so cool is that these old ancient ways of eating are now being proven through science.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah, it's amazing. And part of your practice is really, really focused on the process of detoxification. Because as I always say, no matter how clean is the diet, if we are not able to eliminate waste, our body crashes. So cleansing, detoxification is one of your main focus. And one of the main key principles for detoxification and also longevity, that's the key, is autophagy. So a lot of people don't really know what is autophagy. It looks like a weird word. Could you tell us a little bit more about what it is and the benefits of autophagy?
Yeah, of course. So I think the first thing to realize is that there's two ways to detox. There's self-detox. The human body was actually made to detox, and that's autophagy, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And then there's the detox that most people know, which is like using supplements, maybe using some juicing, things like that. So I call that assisted detoxing. But what's so miraculous about our body is that we were literally designed to detox ourselves. So autophagy was recently made popular by Dr. Yosumi Osumi, who won the Nobel Prize for understanding that when you take food out of the equation, the human cells, what they will do is they will turn on themselves, and they will look within the cell to try to find food, and it finds that in the toxins. So you start to detox basically when you don't eat for an extended period of time. Now, his studies were done on about 13 to 15 hours of not eating. We've gone on, and there's been more studies done that believe the sweet spot of autophagy usually starts about 17 hours, 18 hours of not eating. And from 17 hours of not eating all the way even to people who are doing like 3-day water fasts to 72 hours of eating, your cells, when you're not giving them food, they detoxify, they clean themselves out, and that's how they survive.
And so which are the mechanisms that are stimulating that we have to go in autophagy?
Yeah, this is like the $1 million question. Like we get this all the time on YouTube, and in my resetter group is like, okay, well, if this system is so miraculous, how do I stimulate it? And I think the first step is to realize that you've got to go from eating all day to compressing your eating window. If you can start to compress your eating window and fast a little longer, that would be the first step to signaling to your body that it needs to go into autophagy. So I still am a believer that's the main step. Now, there are other ways that you can stimulate autophagy, like there are herbs like berberine, and some people believe that if you can extend your fast by eating fat, and if your blood sugar doesn't raise, you can get more autophagy. There are supplements that people are using to try to stimulate autophagy. But I'm a little bit old school. I like to go let's start with diet. Let's start with our fasting period to really stimulate it. So if somebody's new to this concept, I would encourage you to really master 17 hours of fasting. That's the best way you're going to get autophagy happening.
So fasting number one, also decreasing the amount of carbohydrates. You said I focus on the diet to decrease the glycemic index in the liver. So you mentioned certain supplements. So what do you think about the coffee and green tea for boosting autophagy?
Yeah, I think they're great. I think they're minor. I think they're minor boosters. So that it's like, I get people who ask me a lot about kombucha to help the microbiome. Kombucha is great, but it's such a small amount of help to the microbiome. So I would say the same thing for green tea and coffee. Like, yes, those are, they can help. But the first step I would say is start with a longer fasting window. The second step, and one that people don't talk about enough, is minimizing your protein. So autophagy actually cannot happen if your protein is too high. So you can go 17 hours without fasting and then keep your protein under 20 grams. I also encourage people to keep their carbohydrate load under 50 grams and really lean on fat as your primary fuel source. And now you've maximized autophagy.
Yeah, because that's a big mistake when people go on a ketogenic diet. In order to increase the fat, they start increasing the amount of protein, and that actually can take you out because it's transformed into carbs, into glucose. So it's all a cycle, and that stimulates the mTOR pathway, which is,
Yeah. And I think that's super important to point out, because I get people who ask all the time, like, I'm stuck, I can't lose weight, I've been doing keto, I've been doing fasting, or it didn't work for me in the first place. And my first question always is, how much protein are you eating? And some people are up to like 150 grams of protein. Well, protein turns to sugar too. It pulls you out of autophagy. You're not going to get the benefit if you're doing too much protein. So I think it's really important for people to understand that.
Yeah, and talking about the microbiome that you were talking, too much protein can also complicate the digestions and then cause fermentation and inflammation. So everything goes together.
Got it.
And then you mentioned, because a lot of people go on ketogenic diet or even fasting, and they think that the metabolism slows down. That after they've been fasting for a long time, they have the fear that too long fasting could slow down the metabolism and they get a reboot effect whenever they start eating. So, so do you think it's mostly because of the protein whenever they start eating, or there are other ways that we can control or speed up the metabolism?
Yeah, this is also a really great question. So the first thing I would say is that, yes, you have to look at the protein. Start by looking at your fasting window, then look at your carb count, bring your carbs down, look at bringing your protein down. And if you're doing all of that and you feel like your metabolism is slowing down, then you need to vary it more. And the example that I use is that if I have a winter cabin and I look out my window and I see that there's a big stack of wood, as it starts to get colder, I look at that wood stack and I'm like, oh, well, I've got plenty of wood. I'm just going to keep burning a fire. So I'll bring the wood in, I'll burn a fire, and I won't even think twice about conserving the wood. But if one day I look out at the wood pile and it's really low, all of a sudden I'm going to start burning a little less and a little less wood. Well, this is the same thing your body's doing when you've been on keto for a long time, is that if all of a sudden it sees that these glucose stores are really low, if it's squeezed everything out of the liver and you're not dropping more weight, then you actually need to feast. You need to go in, to remind the body that it needs to have, that there is more glucose coming, and then go back into keto. So we typically tell people to start with a 5-1-1 protocol, which is 5 days of keto with fasting, 1 day of just a 24-hour fast, and then 1 day of feasting. So that you're always mixing it up. You're always, the body will never get complacent like that.
So this brings me to the question that then it seems that there are different types of fasting, because we always think, okay, fasting is 16 to 18 hours and that's it. Yeah. So could you tell us there are different types of fastings, how to do it, and how do we know which one is the one that works for our body?
Yeah. But another awesome question. So I've come up with what I call 7 different fasts. And I think the first fast is what really most people are doing, which is intermittent fasting. So that's where you don't eat for 13 to 15 hours. And then what you do eat, people who intermittent fast, I just had a conversation with a patient today about this, where they came to intermittent fasting. They got some results, but then nobody taught them what to eat when they started to eat. But when we talk fasting, intermittent fasting is like our beginner fast. That's where I think is a good entry point. Then the second fast is what I call a dinner to dinner fast, or a lot of people call it 1 meal a day. And that's where you can do lunch to lunch, where you're just really compressing your eating window, so that you're just having 1 meal a day. And a lot of people are doing that, and that's great as well. The third fast is dry fasting, which is, I don't know if you know much about that, but that's where you're doing no food or water for 12 to 24 hours. And that's also really great, but you should never go more than 24. You really should be under a doctor's supervision. The Muslim community does it a lot for religious reasons. We have some great studies on that. So dry fasting, like in our resetter group, we have a group of dry fasters. They dry fast 12 hours every Monday. And there is some belief that dry fasting is like 3 times the amount of autophagy, that you in a 12-hour period, you get the same autophagy that you would get in a 72-hour water fast. So I'm still searching for the research on that. Have you tried dry fasting?
I haven't tried because I speak a lot. I was going to ask you, so how do you do it? Because I speak a lot and I get very thirsty. And here in Hawaii, it's very hot. And I drink a lot of water usually. So I'm always scared of going out of drinking water. So how do you suggest to do that for a person that gets hungry or gets thirsty in a fast like that?
Yeah. So this is the way I do it. I get up, I have a glass of water in the morning. I'll have a small cup of coffee because I love my coffee. And then with no cream, I'll just have a little cup of coffee. And then I go all day, no food, no water. It seems like it may be scary, but those of us that have done longer fasts, like if you're doing 3 and 5 day fasts, you'll notice that the more you fast, the less you lean on water. So I think a part of it is just mindset. You're not going to die. You just have to tell yourself you're going to be okay. But if I start the morning with a glass of water, I find that I do okay. And then I'll go all the way till the next morning. And then I'll do a glass of water and a cup of coffee the next morning. So it's 24-hour period, but I'm not, I'm still getting some water on each day. That's kind of how I've done it. But everybody's got a different.
I'm going to give it that try.
Try it.
Excuse me, because there's only water fasting, which I'm okay with that, because as soon as I have water, but still is what you said, is the mindset, like everything. Is the psychological fear of, oh, I'm going to get dehydrated and what I'm going to do. So
it's all mindset. And the more you fast, the more you realize that it just, eating and drinking gets to be kind of a ritual, and we do it when we're bored. We don't always do it when we're thirsty or hungry. So the more you practice fasting, the more you start to reach for different, you start to realize that you're not reaching for glasses of water all the time. So and that's why I always tell people, be playful about it. There's no such thing as a failed fast. And
it's a mechanism of surviving as well. I always say, like, if we get lost somewhere, and that what happens to our ancestors, they never had all the time water and all the time food. It's what our body got used to. So then it gets more and more used to that, and then it's asking for it. Like, for example, the sugar, the same thing. So fasting is a really good mechanism of defense. And then also a really good mechanism of saving money. Because you don't
absolutely. Yeah, if you I always am like trying to think about it from the body's perspective. If food isn't coming in the beginning, would it be advantageous for the body to have more energy to go find food or less? Yeah. And the answer is that we are built with a mechanism, these things called ketones, that give us insane mental clarity, give us great energy so we can go find food. That's the mechanism. And when you learn to not eat as much, and you learn that ketones are so magical and they feel so amazing, that all of a sudden it just is, you're saving money, you're saving time. Oh my gosh, like I laugh sometimes when I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta eat. Yeah, I don't know. Like, so it's a time and money saver for sure.
Yeah, you don't have to cook that often, so that's good. People complain about that the time. So that's good. So what do you think about this other type of fasting, the mimicking fasting?
Fast mimicking, yeah.
That's something that really works for me because I don't do very well with too much protein, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it.
Do you use Prolon, or do you just do your own ratios with it?
Yeah, I do my own ratios.
Yeah. So, fast mimicking, the history behind it was that Walter Longo really brought to our attention that if people who had cancer did a 3-day water fast, they could reboot their whole immune system in 3 days. You would get stem cell production. And that's awesome and beautiful. But what happened was he came out of there and said, well, I wonder if I could do the same thing by limiting protein and limiting calories for people. Could I still get the same stem cell production? And he did it in people who had diabetes, type 1 and type 2. And so 5 days every month for 3 months in a row, he would put people on this fast mimicking diet. And what he found is after 3 months, the pancreatic cells were literally regrowing, which is, again, like, oh my gosh, that's miraculous. Why are we not talking about this more?
Yeah.
It's amazing. And so the fast mimicking diet, I like it. I agree with you. It's easy. We usually, my husband and I will do at least 5 days every month. The idea is really to keep no animal protein, and the protein you do have, you want to have under 20 grams of protein, because that's how you stimulate autophagy. And then you want to keep your calories somewhere between 800 to 1,000. So I like to kind of condense it all into one meal. Some people in our resetter group will spread it out. And I think Walter Longo's research was done spread out. But it's a very doable fast, very, very, and a great one for people to do.
It is, as you said, it's easy. Do you think there is any condition, now that you were talking about diabetes, because the fear for diabetes is that people going into fasting and ketogenic diets, they can end up with ketoacidosis.
Yeah.
Also, I guess also controlling blood sugar levels every day, that's a way to prevent it. But do you think there is any other condition that fasting could be dangerous?
Yeah, I think with diabetes, you really want to be under the supervision of somebody who knows what they're doing. The challenge we have is that not enough doctors know what they're doing. So that you walk into your medical doctor's office and you're a diabetic and you're like, hey, I want to try fasting. And they're like, what? You're crazy. So I do think there are conditions that need to be watched and that you should have somebody coach you through. Diabetes would be one. I think with adrenal fatigue, I have taken plenty of people with adrenal fatigue and fasted them, but you sure as heck don't start with a 3-day water fast. With adrenal fatigue, I believe you should start just by taking your breakfast and just push it back an hour, and just kind of ease your body into it. So the more you start to fast, the more the cells will heal, but you don't want to have this big stressor on the body. So you want to slowly work on that. So those are kind of the main two. I'm also, and we've seen this so much in my resetter group, where people will launch into a fast without testing their blood sugar or their ketones. And I just think you've got to test. You really go invest in a blood meter, ketone meter. And when you fast, you should be looking at your blood sugar and your ketones. Yeah. If your ketones start to go up to like 9.0, 10.0, that's where you're going to want to break your fast if you're not under a doctor's supervision. If your blood sugar starts to go down into the 40s, you gotta, this is not a time to push on through. Those are real hardcore numbers that people need to listen to. But, and I don't know if you see this in your community, but I see so many people that say, oh, I'm going to do a 7-day water fast, and they ignore the numbers and they just push on through, and then they have more damage. So,
yeah, and as you said, it's not just about measuring the ketones, it's about measuring the glucose. That is the one that's really giving us the indication. So which are your favorite brands because there are all kind of up and downs with a lot of these devices to measure glucose and ketones.
So true.
Favorite one?
Yeah. Well, for starters, I've tried them all. I've been like when I first got into this, I tried the breathalyzer. That seemed like it would be really great, but I haven't found one that works well yet. So, then I originally bought the precision meter, and I like it. I get a lot of complaints from patients that the strips are too expensive. So we now are using the Keto Mojo. I think that what Keto Mojo did is they brought the strip price down. And if you're testing your blood sugar, continuously, it can add up and get expensive. But to your point, you're not eating food, so you're saving money on food. So it's well worth investing in the strips.
Yeah, that's when somebody changes into a healthy lifestyle in general, not just on a ketogenic diet. If you keep buying the same dirty food that you were buying before, plus the healthy one, that is when it becomes really expensive. It's about, you put the focus of the money in a different way. Yeah, I do use the precision one as well, because I think that has been the most accurate Yeah,
A lot, yeah. Yeah. And every once in a while we've had some people who've had bad strips and they get weird numbers, but that's really unusual. And I've had my precision meter for like 4 years and it's works really well. So yeah, agreed.
I'm
Yeah.
still talking about certain circumstances that maybe we can use fasting or not. What do you think about kids?
Oh, this is such a good question. Um, okay, so the human body's made to fast, so a kid's body would be fine to fast. Now, having said that, I personally do not think that you should try to fast a kid unless they are coming to you and asking to fast. So I don't think with anybody, fasting needs to be the person's idea. You know, I get people who are like, oh, I want my husband to fast. Well, I'm sorry, your husband's going to want to fast, has to want to fast.
Yeah.
So the same thing with kids is they need to want to fast. Now, having said that, there's a couple little tricks that I do with my kids. Now, my kids are, you know, I have a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. But once I started to understand that we were built to eat at certain times and fast at certain times, I stopped chasing them with food. I stopped saying, oh, you know what? You need to eat breakfast. Like I started to kind of let their natural rhythm with food happen. And I think that's probably the most important thing we can do, because with kids, we try so hard, like you got to sit down and eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner and have a snack in the afternoon. And then when we're an adult, we're so out of touch with our own circadian rhythm. Yeah. So I really, do you have kids? I really encourage people to just, you gotta let your kids find their rhythm with food, and then you'll see that they actually naturally fast.
Yeah, and that's very important, because a lot of eating disorders is not that we have to blame our parents, but it's coming from how culturally we grow. Like I grew up, my mother telling me you have to finish everything that I put you on the plate, and maybe it was like a huge plate. So you know, that's psychological. When you go to a restaurant or any other place, you feel you have to finish all the food, even if it's a lot.
Right.
And too often, which causes a lot of insulin spikes. So
Yep.
changing the mindset is what is important. And as we were saying before, our ancestors, and that's including kids, they didn't have food all the time. So
and I think that it's such an important point to realize that the human body is really made to do this. And so once you really understand the human body, it's incredible how when keto and fasting just works with what the body naturally wants, so it can become effortless. So
yeah, and talking about the human body, women and men, we are totally different, and our hormones change during the month. So I don't know, maybe fasting has to be something that we have to modify a little bit based on women or men.
Yep. Yeah. I'm so happy you asked this question, because I think women really, if there's one message I could shout from the rooftops, it's that women need to do keto differently, and they need to fast differently. So if you're a menstruating woman, our cycle, we are meant to have an estrogen spike around the second week of our cycle, and we have a progesterone spike about the week before we actually have our cycle, or we actually bleed. And so we are in those moments, those are the toughest times for us to fast, specifically right before we have our period. Right before that we need progesterone in order for that uterine lining to shed. Well, progesterone rich foods are not keto foods. Those are like beans and potatoes and squashes and tropical fruits. These are not fruits that people on a ketogenic or a fasting lifestyle eat. And so what I started to see, and I saw it in my own self, is that people will start to lose hair. They'll get anxiety and depression goes through the roof. They stop sleeping. They become really like type A, tightly wound. Their periods go off because they're not honoring, especially this week before your period starts. You need you need smart carbs. You need hormone building carbs. Once your period starts, you can fast great. You can do keto great. but then you got to look for, you need a little more carbs that second week, but you need a lot of carbs the week before your
So that's
cycle.
the fourth week of the cycle.
Fourth week. Yeah.
That's why I crave for sweet potato.
Right. Well, we crave chocolate, we crave sweet potatoes, we crave carbs. So don't go against that. That is your body saying, I need you to give me carbs so I can make progesterone. When I make progesterone, I can calm your brain and I can cause the uterine lining to shed. And once that sheds, now I don't need progesterone anymore. And you can go back and do keto and fasting.
So that's more for food. But then for fasting, still do you suggest that week we still do?
Yeah, I encourage people that week to not fast as much. If they want to intermittent fast, I think that's fine. But I definitely wouldn't be doing 24-hour fasts that week. I think you could get away with 13 to 15 hour, but then once you eat, you need to eat. You really need to eat a lot. So that would be but it's not free reign to eat, dirty keto or eat what, go to McDonald's or have an ice cream sundae. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about these foods that will feed progesterone that aren't keto. So, but not a lot of fasting, and definitely no dry fasting. Like you want to that week really honor yourself.
Mm-hmm. Take care of our hormones. And talking about the hormones, even keto is not about the fasting, but on keto, the amount of fat that we want to put also depends on our goal. And a lot of women, they find themselves that it's really hard to keep a healthy weight. So, but still they want to burn their own fat. So they have to dosify the amount of fat that they're putting from dietary fat. So that has to be different between women and men as well, because men, testosterone is boosting metabolism and is burning fat, and we have testosterone, but the numbers are a little bit lower.
Yeah, and it's a little unfair, but men are definitely made to fast better, or fast more. And so if you're a couple and you're looking at your husband dropping all this weight and eating really what, doesn't have to eat, and you're struggling, you can't compare, because when it comes to fasting, we really need different things. So yeah, and different foods for sure. That's so true.
Yeah, that's the example of my husband and me. He's like this, like a big fat burner, and me, I have to take it a little bit easier.
Yeah. No, a lot of my colleagues are men, and we'll be, at seminars chatting about our experience, and they'll say, oh yeah, I just got done doing a 7-day water fast. And, then, as a woman, sometimes that's just way too hard to do. Mm-hmm. So we just need to really, I can't emphasize enough that we need to honor our bodies need something different. And we can fast. We just need to look at our cycle and really ask ourselves, when is the best time to fast?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. So also during fasting, which do you think is the best exercise? Let's say for a person that is doing dry fasting, no water, no food for 3 days. So that person still needs to exercise. I mean, we all need to move our body, but which is the best way to do it?
Yeah. This is another great question. I think the longer fasts, you really like a 3-day fast or like a dry fast, what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize autophagy, you're trying to maximize stem cells, and you're trying to tap into the inner wisdom of the body. So you should not be exercising very much during that time. Let the body do what it needs to do. But with intermittent fasting, with 24-hour fasting, with autophagy fasting, where you're breaking your fast with fat and you're keeping your protein under 20 grams, or even with fast mimicking, you can exercise. And having said that, that is not the time to start a new CrossFit workout. It's not the time to start something really intense. You want to either stay with what you're doing or do a little less. I personally do yoga when I in any kind of extreme fasting. I love hot yoga, but I find that even that is a little too stressful on my body as it's doing these longer fasts.
Yeah, hot yoga very good for lymphocyzing and then for autophagy, but it's true that during that time can be a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
So then just to keep it a little bit clear based on the different type of fast to understand how often, for how long. So autophagy fast, you said that has to go at least for 17 hours to 12.
Yes. Yeah. So with autophagy fasting, you go 17 hours of fasting and you break your fast with fat. This was actually made popular by Naomi Whittle, and who wrote Glow 15. You break your fast with fat and then a couple of hours later, you can start eating. The trick in autophagy fasting is also the protein, keeping protein under 20 grams.
And then the intermittent fasting is just 16 to 18 hours. That's how
Yes. Yeah, 15 is usually the average with intermittent fasting. And in that one, it depends if you do it with keto or not. You can eat what you want.
And
but it really, No, it really depends on what you're trying to do. So.
And for the dry and the water fasting, for how long you think is the limit that you would go?
Yeah, I think 24 hours is the most because that's all we have research on. And we have this debate in my resetter group all the time. And I just think if you're not under a doctor's supervision, you are really testing the limits of what your body can do. And we don't have enough research on dry fasting. We only have it in who people have done it for religious reasons.
And then 2-3 days fasting, that would be more for a water fasting.
Yeah. So water fasting, usually I recommend people do 3 to 5 days because on that third day, Walter Longo's studies show that the stem cells will appear. And so usually it's a 3 to 5 days is what we recommend.
So you mentioned the fast to break down the fast from the autophagy fasting, but in general, in order to prevent any reboot effect or just the body crashing because you haven't been eating for a long time, which foods do you recommend to use to break the fast? Like 5 days just with water, which would be the most beneficial way to break that fast?
Yeah, and that's also a great question. I always recommend you start with broth. And you could do bone broth, you could do vegetable broth, just when you first start to remember that your gut hasn't been moving. So start with broth. Then the next thing you would go to would be like steamed vegetables. So don't do raw, it's a little too hard. Do some steamed vegetables. You might even try, like one of my new favorite yogurts is a coconut kefir yogurt. So you could do like a coconut yogurt, but again, no animal protein. I feel like animal protein after a long fast should be introduced anywhere from 24 to 48 hours after the fast. So broth, then vegetables, then usually I'll go into like a sweet potato. And then if I'm doing well there, then 24 hours later, I'll go into some meat.
Yeah, and something that you said about cooking the vegetables not raw, I always say that for ideal digestive health, even if raw vegetables have tons of vitamins and minerals, but fiber can be a weapon depending on what we go through. So that's very important.
Yeah, if you have SIBO and you're getting bloated after you eat the fiber, then the cool part about that is keep fasting, because if you get bloated after you eat vegetables, the more you create a fasting lifestyle, the more you'll see that actually changes. So, but after a 5-day water fast, that would be really brutal to your digestive system to put a bunch of raw vegetables in there.
So you would do it like 5 days, once a month?
Yeah, I think, again, so it depends what you want to do. So some of my patients that I coach that have cancer, we really look at doing 5 days a month. Some of them we do 3. I have one patient right now that we're doing 3 days of water fasting every week and 5 days once a month. He extends it out. But for those of us that are looking to just prevent cancer, or we just want prevention, I think those longer fasts twice a year is really good. Like a 5-day water fast twice a year would be great. We do in our resetter group, we take 5 days every month and we practice these different fasts just because I want to encourage people to really explore all different types of fasts. So there's a 5-day period every month that I'm trying some new fast. This month we just got done, or we're in the process of finishing one where I really encourage people to eat more polyphenol foods. So you can play with it and have fun. And once you create a fasting lifestyle, you know, it's just fun. And once you get yourself adapted and you can fast, then it becomes joyful to not have this attachment to food.
Yeah.
And it frees you up to, when you do eat, be a little more, explore a little more.
Yeah, free you up from food. That's very important, because we live in a society that food is controlling our life. And my mother, who suffered from fibromyalgia years ago, not anymore, she used to live to eat. She said that all the time. I love food, I just live to eat, and I just cannot stop it. And of course, she wasn't eating what she was supposed to be eating. But yeah, it's how food is controlling us right now is very important. And going back to the fiber and the 5 days fast, for a person that suffers from constipation and do need to introduce fiber in the diet, what happens when they go for 5 days with no food and fiber?
Well, so this is really interesting, because I have seen people who on the third day have a bowel movement. And you're like, I've often thought, like, where is that coming from? But there's a really good study that out of MIT showing that 24 hours without food starts to produce intestinal stem cells. And intestinal stem cells will repair the damage that's happening in the gut. So you will be surprised. Some people could be surprised that as you go into these longer fasts, all of a sudden your gut heals and it lets go of what it's been holding on to, and the constipation stops. So I've seen it help more than not. Now, having said all of that, there are things you can do, like we recommend Bind, which is like activated charcoal to take to try to get the bowels moving. Some people just up their magnesium. That's fine. But in general, if you start doing a lot of these fasts, you do want to make sure you're having a bowel movement, because with autophagy, your body is detoxing, it's getting stuff out. Yeah. So you want to make sure it's going out the bowels as well.
So now that you mentioned the activated charcoal and the magnesium, so do you think is to take it during the fasting, or be sure that you are doing it before or after? So, because a lot of people are not sure which kind of supplements take you out from fasting.
Yeah. That's also a great question. So with supplements, I think that if you're going to do a longer fast, like 3 to 5 days, you want to minimize your supplements intake, because again, we're letting the inner wisdom of the body go to town. We want it to work. You put supplements in, and now you're messing with the intelligence. I do not think supplements take you out of a fast, but I do think you could check it. You can do a blood sugar reading, take your supplement, and then a half hour later do another blood sugar reading and see if your blood sugar went up. If it did, then yeah, it's taking you out of a fasted state. Now, having said all of that, we find that especially on the longer fasts, that there's something called the fasting trio that we recommend, which is activated charcoal, hydrogen water. I don't know if you have any experience with hydrogen water, but it's really awesome for helping with the free radicals that get released from the cell. Yeah. So I find my favorite on a fast is hydrogen water. It can really it can mitigate those symptoms that you would have from fasting. And then the third is Cyto Detox. One of the things that happens to a lot of people when they fast is their neurotoxic symptoms appear. So things like trouble sleeping, hair loss, agitation, and all that is that there's neurotoxins in there, like heavy metals and plastics, that fasting can't help, and that you need the assisted version of a detox. So usually if someone's going to go a little longer, I always tell them, get some activated charcoal, do the hydrogen water, and then add in the Cyto Detox.
So basically, when people think about lemon water takes me out from ketosis, or coffee takes me out from ketosis, it depends on every person's body. So basically the best is to test for the blood glucose or the ketones, but mostly the blood glucose levels if it's giving a spike.
Yeah. We just did an experiment in my Reset Academy with celery juice. There's a big craze to have celery juice first thing in the morning. And my general take on it has been, it's going to pull you out of a fasted state. So I had my Reset Academy. There's like a couple hundred people in there. I said, okay, everybody try it. Let's see. And everybody test. Do you know that everybody had a different result? Some people, the celery juice brought their glucose down. I had the opposite. It took my glucose up. So, sometimes there's no cookie cutter answer, but that's why I love that little meter.
Yeah.
Go test it for yourself and then you'll know.
No, that's amazing, because the celery juice, I would always think that it's raising your glucose levels. And I do feel it. I'm also really sensitive, like quickly something raises my glucose levels and I feel it. But I would think that for everybody would do that. Yeah.
Yep. No, it was so bizarre. Some people, it just kept bringing their blood sugar down. And I'm like, it's working for you. Keep doing it. So, but for me, my blood sugar went up and I was hungry all day. And I'm like, this is not for me.
Yeah, for me, the juicing in the morning, I also feel is causing the same effect. It's too much sugar out of the blue. I had a background with Candida, and I tend to keep, my lifestyle really low carb, because quickly also tends to raise. So with the juices, I feel that I get hungry more often. I need to eat more.
Yeah, I used to did you ever do the Master Cleanse?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And that didn't really work.
Me neither. I was like hungry all the time. I did one for 10 days and I was so hungry. And now I know why.
Because I started getting heartburn and reflux. It was too much sweetener for me. I mean,
too much sugar. Yep. Yeah. So true.
That's our one.
Yeah.
So what are the other maybe biggest mistakes that you see in people whenever they are fasting?
Well, oh my gosh, we get so many questions from people in our community. So some of them that I'm like, one of the things that I want to do is like teach people how to think for themselves. This is why I love the little meter idea. But we get people who say, is it okay if I drink Diet Coke while I'm fasting? And I want to just point out, like, fasting is about minimal chemicals, minimal influence. You're just letting the body do what it needs to do. Another one that I've seen is that once people break their fast, they go and just load up on really toxic food. And to me, that's counterbalancing, because you're stimulating autophagy, but then you're also, toxifying yourself. So that doesn't really make sense to me. And then I think the biggest mistake I see is that people say, I'm going to do a 72-hour water fast. And they mentally decide that they should do a fast for a certain period of time. And they get 48 hours in and they're struggling and they're not measuring their numbers. I've seen people pass out, not from short fasts, but I had a patient that I kept telling her, break your fast. And she kept going, and at like 10 days, she passed out and fainted. And I'm like, so don't let your mind dictate it. Sometimes you got to look at if you're doing a longer fast, you have to honor the numbers. If you're going below 40, it's time to break a fast. If you're above, you're in the 9s and the 10s with ketones, time to break a fast. I don't care how great you feel or how long you intended to go. Those are the two extremes. So
how would you translate also for a person with low blood pressure?
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I think they can still apply for low blood pressure, but you could also measure your blood pressure, and just if it's going down, then that would be something to look at. But typically those are the two ends of the spectrum that I like to look at, regardless of what your situation is.
Okay. So then which would be your best tips that you will give for a person that say, okay, I'm going to decide to do fasting, is watching everything that you are talking about in here, many different type of fast, which would be the first few steps for a beginner to start fasting?
Yeah. So for beginners, I always say, well, the very, very, very beginning is if you are eating 6 meals a day, push your breakfast back an hour and maybe push up your dinner. So that an hour. So now you're just compressing. That would be the first one. And one of my tips on that is you're probably going to feel bad. So don't expect to feel good. Everything from in life, when we're pushed to an uncomfortable place, we adapt and we grow bigger and we're better. And the body's the same way. So push your breakfast up an hour, your dinner up an hour, your breakfast back. Once you've mastered that, then you should go into intermittent fasting. And the trick there is when you are eating, you want to eat a lot of fat. So if you increase your good fat, you'll find that you can start to push your fasting window back more. So start small, build up, eat more fat, and know you're probably going to feel bad. But if you hang in there over time, you're forcing the body to adapt. I know, I think you have Dr. Nasha Winters coming on this summit, who I absolutely love. And she talks about one of the signs that your mitochondria are that they're not healthy is when you cannot go without food. When you're one of those people that you have to eat all the time, that is a sign that you cannot go without food. So that would be the first step that you're improving, is that you forget to eat or you can go longer periods.
Yeah, there's people that tell me, I think there's something wrong because now I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, it's amazing. It's the most convenient.
I have to force myself to eat. They see it like it's wrong instead of eating every 2 hours, which that is causing a lot of insulin resistance. So then for people that are squeezing between the dinner the day before and the breakfast, which is the minimum amount of time that do you recommend before they put food?
13 hours. There's a really great study that showed that women who had breast cancer, if they just fasted 13 hours every day, their reoccurrence of breast cancer was cut by 70%. So 13 hours would be a good magical place to start.
That's not that difficult.
No, it isn't. But, I don't know if you had this experience. The first time I read about intermittent fasting, my first thought was, okay, I could try that one day. And then when I saw that it was every day, I was like, oh, you're supposed to do this every day? Yeah. So, I do honor that when you first come to this, 13 hours may seem like a lot. But, those of us that have been doing this for a while have the experience you're talking about, where over time you just stop eating. You're just kind of like, whatever, I'm not hungry anymore. And it's such a fun place to be.
And also it depends if we are really following our circadian rhythm or not. Like when I was used to live in Spain, because the schedules over there with the food are crazy, we tend to eat like really late at night, 10 or 11. Yeah. So it was hard there. I was counting hours and I said, I don't even go for maybe just 8 to 10 hours without food because I have a breakfast right away. When I moved to United States, and then the sunset is earlier, and then I have dinners earlier, I realized, without realizing, I was fasting for 12, 13 hours.
Right, yeah.
So
yeah, that's an interesting point. I wonder if anybody's done any research on where you are in the world and if your body should be fasting more or not based on sunlight. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I didn't hear about it.
Yeah. Somebody will come up with it.
And the sunlight also is so different when you go back to Europe. Like in summer, it's like 11 p.m. and it's sunset.
Oh, yeah.
So it's hard to think
of. It's a little harder. Yeah, I would agree. And I do think in the winter time, we're meant to fast a little bit more. The days are shorter. And again, let's go back to caveman days. We didn't have access to food. So the human body, when the days are shorter, you have less light, is going to be easier to get fast. It's going to be easier to do keto. Whereas in the summertime, you have more light. So then the earth is giving you fruits and more higher carb foods. So is it possible that maybe we're supposed to have those more in the summer?
Yeah, that's true. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. There has been an amazing training about autophagy and fasting and the benefits of it for our body and how we can start doing it for anybody that is ready to do it. This is a lot of deep information. Thank you so much for being here and sharing.
My pleasure.